counting down to the dissolution of the 7th Parliament and, of course, the swearing in of a new government. This man here, the President of the Republic, is going to get a second term. And per the Constitution, he has to still deliver the state of the nation. And this is one of those things you do when you're about to leave office. And yes, technically he's about to leave office and he has to account for his stewardship of how he steered the ship. And today he did that. But we're going to be doing something interesting on the show tonight. We're going to give it a reality check. That was the president's own account of the state of Ghana as of tonight. A Ghana that he will superintend for the next 4 years. But of course, as the Constitution has clearly demarcated, there's a distinct 4 years that he's superintendent over. And today he gave an account of it. We'll put a few people together and see if we can do a reality check on that, what he said to us today on the various parts of the economy and the country. Let's start with some of the key, most important, pertinent issues that he touched on. And we start with some of the key issues relating to the aftermath of the 2020 elections. And he talks about him winning a fair election on December 7. Remember that and when he said this in the floor today, there was an eruption because it comes on the back of a contest at the Supreme Court. His mandate, of course, is being challenged. And he says that Ghanaians gave him a clear mandate for 4 more years. The president was very emphatic on this point. He, however, acknowledged the decision of John Mahama to petition the Supreme Court. And he says instead of the pockets of violence that, again, he accuses the government of the former president and his party, the NDC, of pursuing. And he applauds that. And I guess some say he threw a jab there, that is the course he should have taken instead of the pockets of violence that we've seen, he says, has to be condemned by all. So that's the president touching on this very important issue in the state of the nation today. Now, the key thing about the parliament he was in today, this is the 7th parliament he was in, and that his verdict is that the parliament has been most productive. But then he looks forward to the 8th parliament, which he says is going to be more difficult. He acknowledges that because of the nature of it, and that he was encouraging Parliament to be more accommodating of each other because of, and these are his words, almost equal strength on both sides of the House. Now, the minority leader has reacted to this, and he says, when he says almost equal, he is factually inaccurate, and he is pointing to the numbers, which is 137, that is not almost equal, it is absolutely dead equal. There's a controversy over this, and we'll get to look into this when we sit down to have the conversation here on PM Express. Of course, the touch on the economy, and this is his assessment of it. The economy is on a better footing today, he says. Free exchanges has been transformational in guiding the pace for development, the president insists. Of course, that is the president's assessment. What's yours? State of the nation is always like that. Some say it's very subjective, but what the majority of the people believe. Ghana is a net exporter of food and no more an importer, thanks to the plentiful food and jobs. So he's accounted for some of the key things he's done. There's also an abundance of food in the markets due to what he describes as the sound agricultural policies that he's introduced. Now also, the president talks about all the security agencies, and you definitely have to talk about security because, of course, as a president, your number one priority is the security agencies and what they do for the citizens, providing security. He touched on this very controversial subject of Cap 30. They remain on it, and he says a law has been put in place to ensure that happens. The president wants depoliticization also of the issues concerning the fight against illegal mining. This, for me, was a big deal, what he talks about. He says we should have a conversation whether or not we should allow galamsey. But the president, remember, staked his presidency on this. And many were expecting a detailed account of what he's achieved in the last 4 years in this area when it comes to the state of the nation. Did we get that? We'll get our guests to weigh in on that economy. So these are the numbers as far as what he says they met. Now, he's talked about what he's left, his achievement. He says single-digit inflation is what he's leaving in this government that is about to expire, reduced fiscal deficit, also relatively stable exchange rate. Of course, we'll hear this other side of the divide on that. Then COVID-19 is a big one, right? Big one. No government has faced this crisis before. Well, he talks about what this has meant for the economy and the growth projections today, and then the interventions that his government is about to put in place. And this was in their manifesto. This is the Ghana Cares Abatampa program, a 10 million Ghana cedi investment that they want to put in to transform the economy in the next 3 years or so. And the program anchors, he says, is a prospect for a medium term to turn the economy around. Now, the agriculture is key for the government. He talks about the execution of the Planting Food and Jobs program. And then he says Ghana did not experience shortage of food during the COVID crisis. Now, it says Ghana is now a net exporter of food. It's a key area, the country that is largely run on the back of agriculture. No more importation of basic food production as well. Now, on education, we know the biggest strength of the party, the MPP, and the government has been a free SHS. And of course, you'll be remiss not to touch on that today, which you did. And so in essence, that is what he said today. But this is the state of the nation according to the president, right? And his government. We'll bring in a few of the independent minds and of course the NDC also. And thankfully, the information minister is our guest also joining us. And of course on Zoom right now is Kojo Ponkrumah, who is information minister. We also have the CDD's Kojo Asante and we also have Franklin Kujo, founding president of Imani Africa, joining me. In the studio here with me is Suhini, who is, of course, a very vocal member of parliament from the other side of the NDC, and he's also joining me in the studio, a conversation we're going to be having right now. I want to start with you, Mr. Kojo Asante, because I know you've been watching, you probably watched this keenly, also because of the context surrounding the State of the Nation address. First, give me your general verdict on what you heard, Dr. Asante.
Thank you. Good evening to everybody. Good evening to your viewers. Happy New Year to all of us. It's been quite a very difficult 2020. I think when the virus hit in March, many of us don't know how we were going to end the year. So I think many people did not make it. And so we are the fortunate ones, the chosen ones. And that means that there's a lot of responsibility on us to ensure we deliver all our, our commitments for 2021. But let me say that the State of the Nation address was an interesting one. It was, I wasn't sure what to expect from the president because COVID sort of truncated quite a lot of things in 2020. So you could see that the emphasis was to rather take a long-term view of the 4 years and what the government said to achieve, some of the highlights of the things that they did that were good, some of the challenges that they had, and what they considered as foundations that they can build on. So there were bits and pieces on the economy, on the social sector. There wasn't much on the governance side. I think rather on the end when the president talked about some of the important bills that were passed by the 7th Parliament. And I wanted to get some more reflection from the president on particularly some of the governance issues. For example, I was disappointed not to hear the president, just say a few words about the shooting of some civilians during the election, because this is a very, very serious matter. And even if to re-echo, what the IGP has said in terms of investigations, I think it's just at the highest level, because this is loss of lives that really does need some strong acknowledgement at the highest level. So I wanted to hear something of that sort. But I think generally on the broad governance issues around, how does the president feel about the issues around crushing, and because this was one of the main issues that the MPP also set about, to try to deal with. So I didn't hear too much about that, but I did hear about the economy, particularly efforts around the digitization of the economy to make it more efficient, to take advantage
Dr.
of technology.
Dr. Stay with me briefly, because I want to bring in Suhini into that last point you made there. And I noticed that the minority leader was also making the same point about the president's silence on the post-election violence and the deaths. Dr. Sante touched on that also. What's your take on that? Is this something that wasn't said that you expected that the president would have touched on too?
Yeah, Evans, let me say good evening to our viewers and a very happy new year to all. Indeed, it is unforgivable that the president failed to acknowledge the loss of lives, including an 18-year-old who was voting for the first time, or perhaps taking part in our politics for the first time. And we all encourage the first-time voters to turn up in their numbers to vote. And for the president to have recounted events of the December 7 elections without even out of courtesy, even if he didn't mean it, sending words of commiserations to the family was simply unforgivable. And I wasn't surprised, really, because I've had cause to complain about the posture of the president, even on the night that he was fictitiously declared by the Electoral Commission as the winner of the December 7 polls. When he made references to those deaths, at the time it was reported that 5 had lost their lives. And Evans, you have covered elections in this country, and you will agree with me that this is the first time we are having, armed, men and women in uniform gunning down, people who mass up at collation or polling stations. This is the first time in our history. And for the president on that night to have referred to those deaths at the time reported to be 5 as few deaths, I thought was very insensitive on his part, because even one life shouldn't have even been referred to as few. And so for him to have moved from describing such deaths as few, as if to suggest he expected more, to completely ignore that reality, which is a blot on our history as a democracy and should be on our conscience, is simply unforgivable. And I think that no matter how you turn it, no matter how you spin it, it still will not wash with a lot of well-meaning Ghanaians.
Let me bring in Franklin Kojo on this. Franklin, and Happy New Year to you. I know we work closely during elections, and Kojo Asante as well. This point about the post-election violence, or the violence during elections and after that, big deal that the president did talk about it, because some say, today in Parliament, the majority side say, listen, the state agencies are investigating it. The CID has done a press conference about it, indicating what is happening in terms of the investigations. And so the president doesn't need to comment on it because the rightful agencies are already probing it. What's your take?
Well, good evening to everyone. Good to see you again, Evans. Suhini, I must say, was resplendently dressed. I must acknowledge is he going to be stewed or skinned pretty soon? I don't know. But Kojo, good to see you. 2 Kojos, by the way. Well, first of all, I'm sure that it is expected that if we lose lives, we must mention those lives. I mean, it's important to mention names. I don't recall the names of the persons who died, unfortunately, during the elections. But I think that, yes, the president did refer to them as few deaths. But I think that probably a more sorrowful tone would have been would have served the purpose. So I entirely agree with that. But of course, I'm sure there'll be other occasions where the president would make amends. Having said that, I think I may now say my should I say my introductory remarks. I listened to the president, and for me, one of his biggest legacies, which was the creation of the regions, incidentally dovetailed with an action in courts today. You know, I was in the Supreme Court today on a matter that was related to one of his legacies, the SAL issue. And I felt a bit disappointed that the outcome that there was um, may be marring some of his rather interesting legacies that he left. I think the matter of SAL must be well addressed. I think the Supreme Court had an opportunity, but they chose to decide what they decided to say. I think the matters are still outstanding. And that also leads me to one of the points the president made in his speech, which was to suggest that, well, the elections, according to him, was obviously flawless. I think it wasn't entirely flawless. There are still some emerging issues that ought to be dealt with. But by and large, the State of the Nation as given was conducted. I think the architecture or the script as usually given, the president filled all of them. I mean, in terms of the way a State of the Nation is supposed to be done, and more so the parting one before he begins his next term of office, if his challenger contests him without successfully doing so. So I think the president touched on the economy largely. To be fair, the economy was going to do quite well, in spite of the fact that the NPP did not meet its double-digit GDP promise, and they were not going to meet it anyway. But they did impressively. We at Imani rated them almost 54% on the economy until COVID struck. But having said that, though, in spite of the flowery things the president says again, in terms of how the economy has been anchored, digitization and what have you, you saw that the economy was severely challenged after 3 weeks of lockdown. Uh, I mean, he tried to suggest that, well, COVID response was swift, and indeed it was swift. I must say that it was swift, and in spite of the fact that we were going to be depressed had the West not come to our aid. I think we made close to $3 billion. Kojo may correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in terms of the goodwill that came our way, we got significant resources. And so somehow we managed to resuscitate the economy. And I think he's managed to keep the freebies floating even after the elections. I can see that he's extended
the free water,
the water and electricity, well, water alone, by the way, to do that. But there were a number of low points, really. I think that the issue of Galamsey, maybe we are getting into the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I'll come to the issue of the specifics of the Galamsey, because of course that was a key thing that he staked his political career on. But let me bring in the information minister, Kojo Ponkroma. Again, Mr. Ponkroma, congratulations on winning your seat, and of course, Happy New Year to you. So let's begin with the initial comments. There is both Kojo, Dr. Kojo Asante and Suheni had touched on the president's silence on the post-election violence and the deaths. What happened there? Was it deliberate?
So let me say good evening to your viewers and to my colleagues. I'll be sending them an invoice, Franklin and Kojo Asante. And as for Suhini, we're rivals on a different matter, because I didn't hear from them during the Christmas period. So I'll be sending them my invoices as well. But a Happy New Year to all of us as we start this new. I think when it comes to this, the Amendment 2, there's a regular message on the State of the Nation, which a president does at the beginning of the year, usually. And then there is the terminal one, which he does at the end of 4 years, which essentially is his shot at drafting or a draft at the recent 4-year history. And what it does is that it gives the president an opportunity to give his shot at a draft at what has transpired over the last 4 years. The the regular challenge with the message on the State of the Nation is that you have everybody who also has a view about what else should have gone into it. But listen, let me be very honest. And as we're moving into the 8th Parliament, we have to do our politics a bit differently from the past. Let me be very honest. The reality is that every president sees it as an opportunity to craft his narrative and will therefore focus on many of the things that have gone right and have gone well. And would speak less of the civil society groups, etc., to be amplifying. Let us be brutally honest. That's how every president does it. That's how President Akufo-Addo has done it. Now, specific to the matter of whether or not he should have mentioned persons who lost their lives during the recently run election, you will find people with different views on it. That, for me itself, is not even such a big deal. The reality is that the president has spoken about it before. At the time, as my colleagues have mentioned, there were 5. He mentioned it. Not only has he spoken to it, the security chiefs who were responsible for the election security have had an opportunity to do a full briefing on what transpired, what they understand to be the preliminary causes, and what further they are investigating. I'm not sure that the president, not specifically mentioning it, takes it away from the record of what has happened in times past. I think the bigger subject is that the president has outlined key successes during his tenure and places where, even though he doesn't use the word failure, anybody can read between the lines that he considers them not as moments of success. For example, the fight against Galamsey. And I think that's where Franklin was going. And he invites the country that we need to take a second bite at that particular pie and need to do it from a concerted effort, because there are a number of conversations that you cannot win in this country from a partisan point of view. You will need to build broader consensus, a certain commonality of purpose to win on those conversations. And I think what the president does when he speaks to issues like Galamsey, and I think a few other hints of some of this, is to invite all of us that we need to take a second look at these things, because they are not successes I can count, but how do we look at them in a collective manner and find solutions to it? So if you ask me, the president has fulfilled this obligation. Unfortunately, the terminal addresses don't allow us room on the floor of Parliament for that proper introspection and interrogation. Like the majority leader mentioned, we may have to find a way to do that interrogation properly before the House. Maybe the subsequent parliaments, etc., have to be seized with it, or it has to be added to the regular one that will come after this one. But we need an opportunity to interrogate all of that. But all said and done, I think that it's been a good day for our democracy. We need to build on it.
Okay, great. I mean, I'll come back to the issue surrounding the 8th Parliament and what the president said about the nature of it and why they need to build consensus, etc. But let's stay with this last bit about the Galamsey. And Kojo says it's possibly one of the areas where the president touched on an area that he doesn't believe he scored the bullseye in terms of a success there. But Suhini, I need to bring you in on this. We are in this country when the president staked his political career, or his presidency, on that single subject of Galamsey. Today, when he was accounting for the last 4 years, he says, there's one subject about which I believe we, the people, need to have an open conversation. That is Galamsey. Should we allow or should we not allow Galamsey? And I thought, but we've gone past that. In fact, he set the tone and said, this is wrong, and I'm going to stick I'm prepared to lose the presidency over this. Did he meet your expectation on that big subject?
Well, Evans, maybe before I comment on that, I would just like to agree with my colleague Kojo that it is indeed true that every president, every government will want to put its best foot forward when doing this State of Nation address, because you are actually telling a story and you are selling your good works, and so you'll want to put your best foot forward. I agree with him on that score, but I disagree when he suggests that the fact that the president inappropriately referred to the 5 deaths as few on the 9th that he was fictitiously declared is enough for him not to have mentioned it, in the State of the Nation address, because that is something never happened before since 1992. And so you don't gloss over that. And the people involved, Tajuddin was just 18 years old and 39-year-old. These are people who are breadwinners, who are looked up to in their families with a lot of expectation. So if for nothing at all, like I said, even if the president didn't mean it, it would have just been appropriate for him to commiserate with the families and give them the assurance, and all of us the assurance, that it will be investigated thoroughly and the culprits, if found to have acted inappropriately, will be dealt with. I think that we all have to agree on this point, that the president should have, if it was an oversight. I don't believe it was an oversight, considering his first, attitude towards the 5 deaths that were reported. I don't believe it was an oversight, but it can be spun better when you call it an oversight. But on the subject of Galamsey, Evans, if you recall that I have been on record many times to have referred to the president and his government as clueless. And the former president has referred to the governance system that was practiced under the president in the first term of his governance as govern as you go. So clearly, things are done before they are really thought about. Before some thinking really.
I said Galamsey was one of those.
Absolutely.
But there was a clear plan.
Because you see, if there was a clear plan, if there was clear, if it was carefully thought through, the president wouldn't be asking us again if we should debate what he had already decided on to ban and to deal with, and to put his presidency on the line if he failed. I mean, clearly, that is an admission that the thinking that went into it could have been better. And for me, it cuts across many policies. In fact, we launched a free SHS before a policy came about, before we had to do, stopgap measures of, what do you call it? The double track and all. I mean, many policies, clearly, if you examine them, they may mean well with very good slogans and attractive slogans, but clearly no thinking goes into it. I mean, for example, we suggest that the president, when he is doing his fourth State of the Nation address, will be given an account of some of the things that he has done over the 4 years. I agree that it is expected. But when you have the president not giving us, progress reports in areas such as the 1 million one constituency, he spoke about it in 2019, and the equivalent of $1 million cedis in Ghana, I mean, $1 million, equivalent of that in cedis. Evans, if I'm told that in my constituency what it has been able to provide are toilets and water systems, I should be angry. Because I know the equivalent of $1 million in Ghana cedis.
But you have an ambulance, you talked about that.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, but really, did the constituencies get $1 million? No, they didn't. They didn't. In the last 4 years, they didn't. Yes, so like I said, it may be a very good idea. It may sound very attractive when you apply the appropriate slogans to it, but was it really carefully thought through before it was announced as a policy? Clearly, by the implementation, we know that it was not properly thought through. You talk about the one district, one factory. We have had to redefine the promise several times and make it look like the voters didn't understand us when we were doing the campaign, that we are going to cite factories in every district. We now make it look like the voters should have been more sophisticated in listening to us and reading the fine prints of our manifestos. Why did we have to get to that point? Clearly, it's because it was not carefully thought through before, or even if it was carefully thought through, then it was perhaps just fashioned that way to hoodwink people. So it is the same thing with Galamsey. And if you recall, many of us spoke about some of the things that they were doing, they were implementing, that were not going to work, especially given the experience of the past government. The previous government had also waged a war against Galamsey and was less successful. But they wouldn't just listen. It was as if this is the first time a government is committed to the fight against Galamsey, and previous government just sat and looked on. But perhaps if we engage better, if we listen to each other better, experiences could have been shared, and that fight would have been more pointed would have achieved better results.
I'll bring you in shortly on these comments, but I want to bring in quickly Dr. Kojo Asante on that big. I know there was a coalition, and I know CDD played a part in this. That was the biggest fight that we all united in doing. So when you had the president, Dr. Kojo Asante, make the point today that we need to have a conversation should we or should we not? I'm quoting. Should we or should we not allow Galamsey? What was your reaction to that?
I think, I mean, for Galamsey, I have no doubt in my mind that we have to find a way to continue the fight. Because, I mean, when you drive, you go to Takoradi and you see the river bodies, you know that this is a disaster waiting to happen. Maybe we are not feeling it now, but we get to a place where we can't get potable water and we have shortage of water and so on. Then we really will know what we are dealing with. The problem with the Galamsey issue is really with the parties themselves. The process, was undermined by, the president's own party people. And the two cases that are emblematic of it is the Anas case, the excavators case. So there is a deep problem that, and I think Honorable Suini was talking about, even during the NDC time, they had challenges with it because you have chiefs involved in it, you have, people at the local levels involved in it. Everybody is participating in this illegal activity. So the people that you are going to entrust to fight the thing, they themselves are involved in it. So I think the president is right that, yes, we have to have a conversation about it. But I think the conversation is not whether to allow Galamsey or not to allow Galamsey.
No, that's not what he's saying.
It's about small-scale mining, illegal small-scale mining, allowing small-scale mining as against, Galamsey, which is illegal small-scale mining, right? And that is where the conversation have to be. But even beyond that, it's a bigger conversation about the redistribution of mining resources to communities, which is a much bigger, because some of the incentives that is driving a lot of this is, this long-standing argument we've been having about how the state is, redistributing mining resources. So for me, yes, the conversation, have to be had. But the point is, if we don't come to an agreement, then what happens? If we don't come to agreement with our chiefs that, they have to help us protect our water bodies, what are we going to do? So I think that the president, and I'm hoping that, next week, which was the 6th, 7th, that we will hear some plans about how that effort is going to be led. Because there was already a coalition. We were all part of it. So what happened? And as I'm saying, the president's own party people didn't help matters.
Yeah, I mean, the president actually, the president touched on that. And Kojo, I'll bring you in here because Kojo, I make the point about when the president says, and I'm quoting here, should we allow or should we not allow Galamsey? Quote, the illegal mining that leads to the pollution of our water bodies and the devastation of our landscape. And he says, we have to talk about Galamsey. We who are leaders owe it to the country to take the subject out of the party political arena and have an honest conversation about this menace to our future. That conversation has already been had.
No, the president's mention of that is rhetorical. He's not asking us literally to have a conversation about whether to allow Galamsey or not. I think we're all clear on that one. The president is drawing attention to a deeper phenomenon. And maybe if you just give me some latitude. The reality is that there are so many people internally and externally involved in this Galamsey enterprise who end up fighting any president who desires to do a good job at it. President Akufo-Addo has himself been, if I may say, a victim of this fight against Galamsey. I hear people say, how come your margin dropped from 900,000 to 500,000? We are clear in our minds that the fight against Galamsey is one of the major reasons. If you look at the returns from many of the Galamsey areas, they voted heavily against the president and his candidates. Because at the same time, while even internal, and I'm not shy to say it, internal party persons were sabotaging the fight, you also have people on the other side of the political divide. You saw the videos of my good friend, Boahin, I've forgotten his first name, Kofi Boahin or Kweku Boahin, and Dr. Tony Obin, going into the Galamsey areas and telling them that when we come to power, we'll give you an opportunity to continue. These are elements that all come in, and let's be brutally honest. If we want the 8th Parliament and our democracy to be different, we have to be brutally honest with some things and shy away from the regular political posturing. The point the president is making is that we have to come around the table as leaders and have a conversation. That this is not because it fits my party or it could give my party political gain. Therefore, let me seek to make partisan political capital out of it. Because if we do that, in the end, we collectively lose. That's the conversation the president is asking us to have. Because he's taken his presidency on the line. He has taken bullets for it. He's lost parliamentary seats. He's lost the presidential margin, at least some hundreds of thousands of votes because of it. But that and a few other things require a national consensus devoid of politics. And that is where we also need, for example, our friends in civil society, our friends in the media, not just to be quiet or to treat it as a challenge that one person has to solve, but to be quick to call it out and say, guys, you may be on the other side of the political divide looking for power, but you cannot say this to Galamsey operators just because you want them to vote for you. You are undermining the national fight. And Mr. President, these people in your party who are involved in this enterprise is not good enough for us to tinker with it. And that's what the president is inviting all of us to. When he says, for example, on the night of his election and today, that the people of Ghana want us to work together. They don't just want us sitting around the table. They want us speaking a new truth to some of the challenges that we face. Else, if everybody just wants to politically posture and gain from it, your children and my children may not have water to drink because everybody will be afraid of losing parliamentary seats and losing presidential margins if it touches that beast called Galamsey.
Yeah.
President Akufo-Addo is clear that we have to deal with it.
Yeah, but Franklin Kojo, yes, I want to bring you in here on that. And I want to bring you in on a quote. Because Kojo makes the point about politicization. The president said so too. Just to be put it in context, just a few weeks back in the campaigning, this is what John Mahama said on this subject when he addressed the Debo of Chiefs and people at Odum Banso in the Western region on Thursday. This was in the heat of the campaign. Quote, when we come into power, I will grant amnesty to everyone who was arrested for operating Galamsey. I believe that these operators are remorseful towards any unlawful activities and will give them another chance. If you put that in context, was the president right then in saying, let's have a conversation because politicians are involved, including people in his own party?
Well, this conversation to me sounds really funny. I was one of those who was quite skeptical when this whole campaign about the fight against Galamsey started. I laughed, really. Because I said to myself that, basic resource economics tells us that when resources are found and they are not assigned properly, there'll be contestations. In other parts of the world, the only places where you see illegal mining and the devastation of the forests or the natural water resources is in countries where there's no proper delineation of property ownership. To think that we've passed a Lands Act and we are still asking for a compensation, and the president mentioned it today, that the Lands Act is one of the things he passed, which indeed is his we pay glowing tribute to Parliament for doing so. In the Lands Act, it's a conversation about the right to ownership of resources. Because we've not delineated those, we've not had that proper conversation as to who owns mineral rights when it's found on the land. Well, some say it belongs to the state. But before you go through 14 steps to get a mining license, before you come back, someone else is mining on your field. Now, all of these are the reasons why we have all this Galamsey stuff. In fact, to blame modern technology, as the president did in his speech, was another aberration on the issues of land use economics. I, obviously, as a student of land economy, have studied, and I don't even have to be a student of land economy. As a libertarian, I know that when property rights are not properly delineated, you have all these problems. It was first an issue about the resources, the cost of mining, right? At a point, it was costing close to $350,000 to buy those machines that the Chinese have so blessed the world with in order to do damage to the environment, right? Mm-hmm. Then the Ghanaian found the Chinese an ally and they managed to mine. But the reason why you have all these puppies of illegal mining all over the place is because the fundamental issue of securing a mining license is in itself a Herculean process. You have 14 steps before you get a mining license. You need to come to Accra to get the ministers to bless it. It is not localized. If these things were decentralized, that is the only way you can see a stemming of the tide of these so-called illegal mining. So the conversation to have is to go back to the Lands Act and then look at what aspects assures us of proper ownership of land rights. Otherwise, if everything belongs to, you see, there's something we say in resource economy, the tragedy of the commons. What belongs to everybody tends to fall into disrepair. What belongs to you tend to take care of. If these lands belong to interested persons who were properly taxed, right, and properly taxed and asked to keep these landed resources properly, I don't think we'll have all these problems we are seeing. But because the lands do not belong to anybody, anybody can go in and mine. That is why when excavators are seized, because they belong to nobody in particular, in quotes, they get to vanish. That is why it is very easy for some appointees of government, assigns of government, to ditch the president's message, and then they go back to doing it. The conversation to have is in resource economics, and I think we need to go back and look at that conversation.
I want to take a break soon.
I'm not sure resource economics would solve this problem.
Well, but Kojo, you see, in the United States,
resource economy.
Well, the point really is this: in the United States and most of the other countries, we know where resources exist. You don't have all these problems. Have you asked yourself why?
Yes, but
because they don't have as much gold as we do.
Oh no,
well, that's not correct.
That's not true.
I'll come to wrap up before I took a break. So great. Okay, so a minute.
You see, I like the invitation by Kojo for us to have an honest discussion. We need to be very committed to that call. It should not just end on our lips. And it is on that basis that I want to say, and I believe that I will not be disagreed with, that this government had all the support that previous governments never had from civil society and from media to have won this fight against Galamsey. So I think it's a tragedy, especially for the media that dedicated so much airtime to this fight and civil society that dedicated resources to this fight, that we ended on a note that Kojo says was as a result of people internally sabotaging the president and other, of course, other reasons. Now, the question I will want to ask is, what has the president, leadership is everything, done to those people who we all know and agree may have internally sabotaged this fight that the whole nation, including the media, was engaging? That is where you have a problem with leadership.
I want to take a quick break. When I return, I want to talk about the big conversation right now. And we've talked a touch a bit about economy and the Galamsey and other issues. But the big conversation right now is about the next government, the parliament, the processes post-elections. The president touched on that. And there's a governance question there also. And he says about the 8th parliament that it's going to be different and that they need to work together. The question that minority is asking is, has he been walking the talk the last few days to reach out to build that consensus, hopefully setting the tone for that, conversation that he says the people indicated in the way they voted for parliament? And when we return, we'll have that conversation, especially now that we know both parties have proposed names for the speaker position, setting the tone for acrimony tomorrow evening, midnight into the 7th. Stay with us. Yes, still live here on PM Express. My guest is still the Hassan Suhuyini, who is a Tamale North. I always want to say Tamale South, but Tamale North MP there.
That's my minority leader.
Yes. I wouldn't dare. And also MP for, of course, of Wasa Yoruba in the region is the MP and also current Information Minister, Kojo Nkrumah, and Franklin Kojo is the founding president of Imani Africa, and of course, Dr. Kojo Asante with the CDD. Now, let's have this conversation within the context of where we are. I guess it's a key thing to talk about, and the president touched on it quite significantly. In the next 24 hours to 48 hours, big things will happen in Ghana, in Ghana's democracy, in parliament, such as we have never seen before. This is how the president captured it. He says, the good people of Ghana have spoken and given Parliament an almost equal strength on both sides of the House. We have no choice but to work with the consequences of the desires of the people. The House would have to be more accommodating of each other's views and probably devise new ways of conducting its affairs. Now, this is the President's own view of what is going to happen in the 8th Parliament. And he said before that there should be consensus building. I guess the spirit of what he said there highlights that. Question is, did he sound conciliated? Did he sound like somebody who was walking the talk there? Has he reached out? Well, what's your reaction to this?
Well, first of all, the president was less than honest on two accounts. The people of Ghana did not give us an almost equal, number of seats to work with in Parliament. What we, and I believe the majority of the people of Ghana believe, is that the people of Ghana gave the NDC a majority of the seats in Parliament. Unfortunately, we have a government that is determined by hook or crook to work with other institutions to reduce that majority.
But the courts have had their say today. On Hohoi, the court has had the say today. On Techiman South, the court has had the say today.
I said we have a government that, by hook or crook, with other institutions.
So the judiciary is in on this?
With other institutions, have been determined to rob us of that majority in Parliament. Look, the court in Techiman did not go into the merit of the case. The merit of the case will establish that it is a hijacked seat. That's the point we are making. But until that is established, the government by hook or crook will claim to have an equal number with the majority side being the NDC. Hohoi is another matter. So we are saying that, I'm saying that the truth is that the majority of the people of Ghana gave the NDC a majority in Parliament.
How is that the truth?
But it's the truth because, look, if
it is at this point your opinion, the facts say 137 independent.
Yes, that's what I said on two accounts. That's the first account. The first account you can decide to call my opinion, but if you want to pay attention to the facts, especially in Techiman, you cannot miss what I am talking about, the determination to, hijack one or two seats so that we will be equal and not almost equal. And that's the second count. We will be equal and not almost equal. Because you are talking about two parties in Parliament.
Yeah. Let me ask you because of time.
NPP has 137.
137. When the president says the House would have to be more accommodating, is there the environment in Parliament right now to be accommodating of each other?
I've been very honest about the speeches of the president and that he always says the right things. And perhaps we should commend his speech writers. But my problem has always been whether he understands the speeches and he means them when he reads them. He reads them beautifully, attractively. I've always said that also. But unfortunately, immediately after the speeches, actions and posturing suggest that they were just words in print, without any weight and without any commitment made. So, for example, on the 9th that the president was fictitiously declared the winner, in his speech, he made this point in another way. But what have we seen thereof? What we have seen is an attempt to intimidate the majority side elected, that is the NDC.
The police is prosecuting you fairly.
The police take instructions. It's a regimented institution. It's a regimented institution, and we all know that. And the police also read the mood of every government. And like Kojo said, we need to be very frank in these discussions that on such political matters, the police don't act alone.
Okay.
In fact, I will just give you an example.
Briefly, because
on the reason why the majority leader, the soon-to-be majority leader, Honorable Haruna Idrisu, is prosecuted. It's the same conduct that we engage in when we visited our colleague after the Ayawaso West were gone to the IGP's office. IGP's office. The minority, I'm sure you recall because your reporters were there, processed from Parliament to the police headquarters, and we were not stopped, we're not prosecuted. Why now?
Kojo, what you say about that? That the president says we have to be accommodating, and the view from the minority side is that at least he's not shown that he himself is going to be laying the foundation.
The president has demonstrated that he's committed to his words. I think that, listen, we have to recognize that the times are different. And I keep making the point that if we want to live with the times, this whole politics of let's accuse President Akufo-Addo and let's call him names, etc., we've got to move away from it. What has the president said? The president has said that, listen, we are near equal in Parliament, and that it means we should work together. Almost. This whole thing about is not true because, in our opinion, if you add Techiman to it, remember at first they said they had won 140 seats. Then it dropped to 139. 139. Then it dropped to 138, what they now call a working majority. And now they are clinging on to Techiman. Every party is even allowed to tell its supporters what it believes to be its truth. But if we want to work together and to move forward, we get to a point where if you say that, for example, you have won Banda, like we say we are of the view that when the coalition is done properly, we have won Banda. We don't go on making the point that we have 138 plus 1 independent. We accept that the EC says it's 137 plus 1 independent, and that our best option is to go and challenge Banda. And it is the same thing on the NDC side. Now, what the president is talking about is that we need to recognize that the politics
I think you have to remind Kojo that Banda was collated 3 times.
We'll come to that. We don't have time to go into that.
Techiman has been
I wanted to state
Banda was collated.
I can get Dr. Kojo compromised.
It could have been collated 5 times. Don't worry, Suini, don't worry. It could have been collated 5 times. The point I'm making is that to the extent that we as a party are of the view that a proper process would bring Banda onto our side, we just don't have to go on and on and on and on telling everybody that the thing is not, accurate and literally holding up the process as a result of what we believe. There are legal processes for advancing what we believe. There comes a point where you have to, in the spirit of all that we are trying to do, come to the realization that, okay, this is my belief, like Mr. Mahama has done. He says, this is my belief. I'm going to go to the Supreme Court to challenge the presidential, and I think you as a party are also proceeding to challenge some of the parliamentaries and let the process work. Nobody in this country can hijack a seat, especially where we have come and have made so many reforms to our political and adjudication processes with shortened times, etc. But back to the principal issue, working together, what does it mean? It means that all the time we spend debating things that excite myself and Suhini, and things that excite the two sides, and sometimes we get lawyers on the two sides to go on for 3 hours and explain different views. That don't put food on the tables of people, don't extend electricity to people's homes, don't advance people's lives. That's the message the Ghanaian is sending us, that cut that crap out and work together on the things that enable us to move forward as a country. Between Suhini and myself, yesterday we were locked in a meeting at the Committee of the Whole, talking about things that we believe are important. The Ghanaian wants to see that it's not only on those matters that we work together on, but now when it comes to, for example, ensuring that employment is deepened across the country, income levels are deepened across the country, agriculture, it's not just the macro numbers, but the micro numbers make sense to people. They want to see us working together. So here's my point. The conversation about working together for me is not about, is the president's posture sincere? No. It's about what are the specifics that Ghanaians want to see us work on, and how are we going to commit ourselves to work on, not just us, but we need the help of Evans, yourself, our friends in the media. sometimes you fund unnecessary controversy between us. And we will get into it because everybody wants to get his support text excited. Does that deliver for our people? No. Our friends in civil society. Sometimes you see clear untruths going on that you know are playing to the political advantages of people. But you keep quiet and don't call it out. And on other occasions, you elect and then you call it out. All of us are being called.
I almost see the mischief in the smile that's about to pop up on your face when you said that about the media. Because this man in the studio here is also a very diabolical brother, and you're also a very diabolical one when both of you were in the media. But listen, because of time, forgive me, Kojo, let me quickly get a few seconds out of Dr. Kojo Hassan. Doc, forgive me on this. Just a few seconds on this, Franklin, also, on this very important matter.
Well, I'm just, I think it's watch and see. There's a lot of permutations. Let's see what happens on the 6th. I think that will be a real test of how this parliament is going to work. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed. We are in a we're supposed to be getting to a post-COVID period. It's going to be challenging, even beyond the fact that we have a very close parliament.
Yeah,
the challenges are huge. So there has to be a lot of working together to make things work for all of us.
Yeah, Franklin, you have the final word. A few seconds.
Well, I'm excited. At least I'm not going to see the frightening speed of light at which some of the bills pass through Parliament.
Okay.
But Franklin is
but you know, Evans, I think
that's it. Thank you, Suyuni. Diabolical partner in crime in the past, and then Kojo also.
I'm surprised you didn't let us talk about the security arrangement in Parliament.
Yeah, I mean, I know you had issues with that, but I'll see you in Parliament tomorrow. We're going to spend a whole day tomorrow with you. Enjoy the rest of your evening, gentlemen.